Welcome to review number 12, the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a period of rapid industrial growth that begins in England during the middle of the 1700s and over the next 50 to 100 years spreads to many other countries, most notably the United States. One key thing to remember about the Industrial Revolution is that it was characterized by the replacement of hand tools with power-driven machines, and that production shifted from occurring in small cottage industries or in people's homes to larger buildings, which we now call factories. The Industrial Revolution begins in England because England had all the required parts. Lots of natural resources such as coal and iron, rivers for transportation, large population which could provide workers, and finally a government that was friendly to business. We will start by taking a look at some significant changes in agriculture which were very important to the Industrial Revolution. Traditional agriculture used what was known as the open field system. Since the Middle Ages, they had known that if you grow the same crop in the same field, that eventually your yields fall. Today we know it's because the nutrients in the soil are being depleted. They did figure out what is known as a three-field system, where you would rotate the crops between the fields. Here we see in field 1 that wheat is being grown. In field 2, barley is being grown, and field 3 is left fallow or empty. It is giving a year for the soil to recover. Additionally, animals would graze on this, mostly cattle, and the manure from the animals would help fertilize the field. The next year, you would have field 2 would grow wheat, field 3 here would grow barley, and field 1 would have its turn as being fallow, or the opportunity to rest. In the three-field system, local landowners rented small plots of land to tenant farmers who grew just enough food to survive. Eventually, landowners realized that they could make more money and be more productive by renting out the entire field to a single farmer rather than small strips to a number of tenant farmers. They could charge more for the entire field, and the farmer would be willing to pay more because he now had control and could be more productive without depending on other people. The enclosure movement was often marked by using hedges or fences to designate the fields, as we can see in this picture. Often, the village commons, or a common plot in the village that everyone in the village could share, was also enclosed by the landowner. The result of the enclosure movement was many people who were just barely surviving as farmers were now no longer able to make a living in farming. As a result, they moved to towns in search of jobs. Agriculture during this time period enjoys rapid growth for a number of different reasons. First, the population of England is growing rapidly. No longer is the plague sweeping through on a regular basis, reducing the population. So the population is growing. With this growing population, there is an increased demand for food. And as we know from economics, when you have an increase in demand, you have an increase in prices. So farmers now could make more growing food. The golden age of farming is between 1840 and 1870 in the United States as well as in England. And again, for the same reasons we mentioned before, growth in population, growth in factories and towns. People are now working in factories and not raising their own food. So it gave farmers the opportunity to sell more. Transportation improved to get fresh food to the towns in a timely manner. And finally, agricultural education. Colleges and universities started focusing on agriculture and working to make improvements. Now let's take a look at some of the advances in manufacturing that the Industrial Revolution is known for. As we mentioned before, the Industrial Revolution marks the end of what is known as the domestic system of manufacturing, where most goods were made at home and using hand tools. The move from home-based industries to factory-based meant more goods could be produced and the quality of those goods could be controlled and be much more consistent. The first industry to see these technological improvements was the textile industry, or the making of cloth. So let's take a look at that. The textile industry was very low tech and very labor intensive, generally done by a family. Periodically, a merchant would deliver shipments of wool and pick up any completed cloth. Within the family, the younger children generally started by combing the tangles out of the wool so that the mother and the elder daughters could spin the wool into thread. Then the father, and at times the mother, would operate a loom and weave the thread into cloth. As we saw in agriculture, there was a revolution in the textile industry that was spurred on by growing demand coming from a larger population. The technological changes included the use of machinery, which allowed more to be produced, and the shift to a factory from a home environment allowed for the use of unskilled, cheap labor. And finally, there was a shift from wool to cotton. The first technical advance that we're interested in was developed by a gentleman by the name of James Hargreaves. It's called the spinning jenny. The spinning jenny allowed the machine to produce an equivalent amount of thread that 9 individual people could. The technical advances brought a great increase in productivity. In these pictures, we see a hand-operated loom, which is used to weave the cloth, and to the right, a power-driven loom. The advantage of the machines is they didn't get tired, they weren't in a bad mood, or didn't have a bad day. As a result, the quality was much more consistent. And because we could use unskilled labor to operate these machines, the cloth was less expensive to make, thus more profitable for the business owner. While wool was in plentiful supply in England, it was not the perfect material for cloth. Cotton had many advantages, being lighter and taking dye much easier to make it more attractive, but there was a limited amount of cotton available. The problem was the sticky cotton seeds within the cotton ball. Thanks to Eli Whitney and the invention of the cotton gin, which we see to the left here, the mechanical system could separate the cotton seed from the cotton in short order. And as you can see from this table, the amount of cotton imported to England for use in the factories skyrocketed. With the introduction of machines to produce the materials, it made more sense to put these machines together in a single place. Additionally, the machines required power to operate. We don't have electricity yet, so the first source of power was running water. And here we see a picture of a mill which is using running water to turn a wheel which is connected to large leather bands, which in turn operate the machinery. There are some limitations to this system, the biggest one being your factory had to be located at a place that had an adequate supply of moving water. As owners built factories in places that had the required water and access to raw materials, People began moving to these towns in search of jobs. This led to the growth of many cities.